This afternoon, it is my sad duty to introduce a motion of condolence in the name of the First Minister. The flags at Holyrood fly at half-mast today in honour of our dear parliamentary colleague, Christina McKelvey, MSP. We stand with our friend and colleague, Keith Brown, MSP. And on behalf of all members, on behalf of all who work in the Scottish Parliament, my warmest welcome to Christina and Keith's family who join us today. Christina spoke of Lewis and Jack with such love and pride. She adored her grandchildren. Please accept our deepest condolences and our most sincere sympathies. There has been an outpouring of respect and affection across this chamber, across the Parliament, and from far and wide for Christina in these difficult days. And I hope that you will take comfort and solace from the great number of messages that you have received. Only a few short weeks ago, Christina announced that she would not seek re-election next May, and she wrote that it was the honour of her life to represent the people of Central Scotland and the communities of Hamilton, Lark Hall and Stonehouse over the past 18 years. She wrote too of her pride in all that she achieved as an MSP, as a convener and as a minister, and rightly and deservedly so. Christina's desire to make things better for people defined her approach to public service. Her own illness made Christina doubly determined to use her position to raise awareness and to advocate for others. The Parliament community is sad and subdued. We feel Christina's loss sorely. A passionate debater in the chamber, but she had such great chat in the garden lobby. And when it came to wearing it pink, no one wore it like Christina. We will miss her. I call the First Minister.
Presiding Officer, it is with great sadness that I rise to move the motion in my name to honour and to express our thanks for the profound effect on all of our lives of my colleague and friend, Christina McKelvey, MSP. I'd like to thank other parties in this chamber for offering their debating time today to allow more of my party colleagues to make their tributes today. It is an act of generosity which is deeply valued by us all. Last week I used the term force of nature to describe Christina's life. And although a frequently used term, in Christina's case, it was entirely justified. She was born in Glasgow in the late 1960s, and she was very proud of her Easterhouse roots. Growing up, she saw at first hand her fair share of injustice affecting her family and her community. But she also saw the very best in people. In particular, she drew enormous inspiration from her mum, her dad and her grandparents. And over the years, Christina spoke a lot about how these experiences shaped her beliefs and her values and made her determined to address the injustice that she had witnessed as a child. Her dad was diagnosed with MND when she was just 9 years old. Christina saw not only how her mum cared for her dad with such love as his illness progressed, but also how she worked nights to support her 4 children at a time when there was scandalously little support available from the state. Christina associated a yellow rose with her late mother, and you, Presiding Officer, myself, my colleagues and many others are wearing the yellow rose today in their honour. For the last week of Christina's life, her family placed a yellow rose by her side. I've been rereading an interview Christina gave a few years ago, where she recounted the day that her dad learned of his MND diagnosis. He came to her school, rounded up Christina and her siblings, and told the protesting head teacher that while his kids could come to school any day, they cannot always spend a day with their dad. He then took them to the cinema to see Star Wars. Presiding Officer, on what was a devastating day, I think I understand the lesson that Christina's dad wanted to impart to his young children. And judging by the way Christina recounted that story all those years later, it's clear that she did too. Every day counts, and we should make every day count. That was certainly how Christina went on to live her life. She began her career in social work services and entered the trade union movement as a member of Unison. Elected politics beckoned. Entering this Parliament in 2007, Christina quickly made her mark as one of its most energetic and engaging members. She was a tireless champion and campaigner for the Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse constituency that she loved. And it's her efforts for her constituents struggling with energy bills particularly that stand out for me as something she did on behalf of some of the most vulnerable in her community. In 2018, alongside her council colleague Julia Mars, Christina worked with Scottish Power to establish a quick credit voucher scheme to support those in fuel poverty. It would allow constituents attending food banks to access vital heating or power to cook their food. Having successfully trialled this scheme in Hamilton, Scottish Power rolled it out in other areas. To date, this plan has helped around 20,000 families or individuals. Christina did not seek personal credit for this wonderful initiative, but it is clear that she was absolutely crucial to its creation. Presiding Officer, Christina's achievements in Parliament and in ministerial office are no less impressive. She was rightly proud of her work as convener of two committees, European and External Relations and the Equalities and Human Rights Committee. She sponsored, as you mentioned, Presiding Officer, the very first Wear It Pink Day in the Scottish Parliament in support of breast cancer now, long before her own diagnosis. Many an image-conscious parliamentary colleague, and there are some, will recall that feeling of absolute trepidation as Christina, armed with all sorts of pink paraphernalia, would hunt members down to ensure they all played their part in the campaign to raise awareness of breast cancer. And I can confidently say that the only person on the planet that could persuade me to wear endless pink paraphernalia would be Christina McKelvey. She campaigned for better support for people living with MND in honour of her late father. She was a key parliamentary supporter of the TIE campaign, which led to inclusive education being embedded in every school in Scotland, and the diligent persuasion, quietly, that Christina undertook was crucial in my decision to make this happen. She fought to support those at risk of domestic abuse by championing Clare's Law, which allows the disclosure of previous violent and abusive behaviour. She worked to tackle the stigma surrounding menopause. She launched the world's first strategy to tackle loneliness and social isolation. She campaigned to improve the lives of gypsy travellers in Scotland. And she fought to protect girls by introducing legislation banning FGM. Presiding Officer, every cause to which Christina devoted herself was underpinned by the core values that she held throughout her life: equalities, fairness and social justice. She was a lifelong campaigner on nuclear disarmament, a proud feminist, a staunch socialist, a committed trade unionist, a nationalist and an internationalist, deeply devoted to Scotland, realising her potential as an independent nation at the heart of Europe. In all, Christina did make every day count. Even in recent years, when facing her cancer diagnosis, Christina was still thinking of others. She publicly encouraged women to check themselves and to attend their screening appointments. And she was so passionate about trying to improve the lives of others through her work as Minister for Drugs and Alcohol Policy that she was determined not to step back from her duties until she absolutely had to last summer. Christina was a much-loved member of the SNP family, but it was of course her own family that brought her the greatest happiness in her life. Everyone who knew Christina and her partner, our parliamentary colleague and my party's deputy leader, Keith Brown, could see how much happiness that they have brought to each other. She spoke always of her pride in her sons Jack and Lewis as they grew up, and more recently, Christina had the unbridled joy of becoming a granny. I express my deepest sympathy and that of the Government to all of Christina's family and friends at their very personal loss. Presiding Officer, in Christina's heart, there was room for all of us. She was one of the kindest and the most generous people I have ever met in my life. My government has lost an outstanding minister. My party has lost one of its finest parliamentarians. And many people, of all parties and of none, have lost a true friend. But I know that we will all feel the glow of Christina's warmth for years to come. There are tough days in political leadership. If you were ever having one, Christina McKelvey would make you feel better, with warmth, hope, encouragement, and always with laughter. I am so profoundly grateful that my life has been blessed by the friendship and the love of one of Parliament's finest, Christina McKelvey.
I now call on Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On behalf of my colleagues and my party, I commend the First Minister on his warm, heartfelt and personal tribute to our late parliamentary colleague, Christina McKelvey. In previous remarks, Mr Swinney said that Christina's political allies and opponents alike would agree she truly was a force of nature, a point he repeated today. Well, we do agree, and we are grateful for the chance to pay our respects to the force of nature that was Christina McKelvey. On Christina's website is the following quote: "My aim is to be an accessible MSP, available to respond to my constituents' needs whenever and wherever possible." And that is exactly what she did. She will be missed by our constituents in Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, and she will be missed by those who worked with her as she performed her duties as an MSP and as a minister. And she will be missed by politicians from all parties, including my own. In his tribute to his partner, Keith Brown said that she was proud of her working-class roots in Easterhouse and often said she could not have dreamt of becoming a government minister. Her success is a fitting legacy, confirmation that no matter where you come from, you can aim high and you can succeed. And as a member of this Parliament, she made great use of her opportunity. As the First Minister said, she hosted Parliament's first Wear It Pink event in support of breast cancer now, long before she was diagnosed with the disease that took her life. And one of her greatest achievements was promoting Clare's Law, which allows the police to disclose if someone's current or ex-partner has a history of violence or abuse. And that has made a huge difference to so many lives. I conclude by telling Christina's partner, Keith Brown, her beloved family who have joined us today, and her colleagues, that they are in our thoughts. We cannot ease their pain, but hope the esteem in which Christina was held brings them some small comfort in this difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call on Jackie Bailey.
Presiding Officer, on behalf of the entire Scottish Labour Party, I want to put on record our deepest condolences on the passing of Christina McKelvey. Christina's death, we know, will be keenly felt by her family, particularly her sons, Lewis and Jack, and of course her partner of many years, Keith Brown. And for her friends and colleagues in the SNP, the hurt will be all too present. Christina's passing has been a cause of grief and of sorrow across this chamber, in her community of Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, and with all who had the pleasure of working with her, and of course for her constituency and parliamentary staff too. She was a woman who dedicated her life to public service and to working to improve the lives of her fellow Scots. I first met Christina many years ago, long before she entered frontline politics here in Holyrood, and she was fierce then, believe me. Already she was dedicating her time to causes she believed in. She worked in supported employment in the East End of Glasgow and was an active trade unionist in Unison, which is when I first met her. Standing up for working people, demanding fairness and justice for her colleagues, she was absolutely a force of nature. So it was no surprise that when Christina was elected to this Parliament in 2007, that she championed progressive causes. As convener of the Equal Opportunities Committee, many of her early interventions in the Chamber reflected her passion for equalities, often reflecting on her earlier career and real-life experiences of supporting vulnerable young people into adulthood. And as Christina's skills became apparent to the government, she rightly was rewarded with ministerial roles that reflected her commitment to social justice. First as Minister for Older People and Equalities, and latterly as Minister for Drugs and Alcohol Policy. And despite our very occasional differences of opinion, Christina was always open for debate, open for discussion, putting outcomes for the people of Scotland before narrow party considerations. And I respected her enormously for that. And when Christina was sadly diagnosed with breast cancer back in 2020, she responded in characteristic fashion by continuing to raise awareness, having, as we've heard, always supported Breast Cancer Now's Wear It Pink, and encouraging women to regularly check their breasts and attend screening appointments. As ever, she did all of this with her characteristic good humour, always smiling, always warm, and I found always up for mischief. Presiding Officer, the passing of Christina McKelvey leaves a void in our Parliament, in our public life, and in the hearts of many who knew her. But as we reflect on Christina's life, it is impossible to conclude that it was anything than a life well lived. A life dedicated to the service of others, a life full of love for her friends and her family, and a life that has touched so many others and enriched our days.
Thank you. I now call on Patrick Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm grateful not only to have known Christina McKelvey, but grateful for the opportunity to offer the deep condolences of the Scottish Greens to Christina's family and friends for their very personal loss. It's a loss, though, that will also be felt very deeply by everyone who worked with Christina. Of course, most acutely by SNP colleagues. But Christina was someone who was held in great affection, as I think we've already heard, right across the political spectrum. So to the whole family, and of course to our colleague Keith Brown, I hope that they know they have been in our thoughts and will remain so. Over the last week, there have been some common themes in the conversations that I've had with colleagues about Christina, colleagues from different political parties. I've heard people reflecting on her friendship, her warmth, and the way her passionate belief in her values, and at times her very real anger at injustice, never took away from her sense of fun and her positivity. I've heard from so many members who recall Christina's kind words when they were first elected. That's something that means a lot to new members. It can be a daunting experience coming here for the first time, and I know that there are many in the chamber today who arrived here in recent elections who will value those memories of Christina's friendship and warmth. So, in offering our condolences to those who knew and loved Christina, I hope all of us in Parliament can return some of that friendship and warmth. As has been said, her work in Parliament and her first ministerial role covered equalities, and there could hardly have been a better fit. I want to express my gratitude especially for her strong track record on LGBT+ equality and human rights, often facing down some of the divisive and nasty forms of prejudice, both old and new. And I lost count of the number of times that I heard her speak with passion about the need to treat asylum seekers in our society as human beings, and the pride that Scotland should take in offering safety and welcome to those who need it. One last theme that has come up in those conversations I've had over the last week, it's something that's been on my mind, but I've heard many others make the same observation. We all know that politics isn't always a nice business. It doesn't always bring the best out of us. And people sometimes worry that the job will change us for the worse, and sometimes that happens. In my experience, Christina McKelvie defied that fear. She never gave in to cynicism, entitlement or cruelty. She remained a person who instinctively expressed compassion and kindness. So I hope that her life will be celebrated. Of course, just as a lovely human being, but also as an example that politics and politicians can stay human and humane.
Thank you. I now call on Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, members of Christina's family and Keith, there are days when this place sits in shadow, in times of national crisis, of political rancour, and in days of grief like this. But there are times when it absolutely shines. More often than not, the spoken contributions of Christina McKelvie, MSP, lent themselves to such occasions. We came from different political traditions, but I recognised that defiant brightness with which she carried herself from our first meeting, long before I entered politics in my days as a youth worker. I'll never forget the giddy joy that she brought to Abelar's Strictly Come Dancing fundraiser when, after a chance meeting with Keith Brown on a train, I persuaded both of them to enter months of training ahead of that event. She was well regarded both at home and overseas, and I was so impressed at the warmth with which she was greeted on a committee trip to Strasbourg by parliamentarians, diplomats and human rights defenders alike. Indeed, the defence of human rights was absolutely central to who Christina was. And you may recall, Presiding Officer, that she came perilously close to being ejected from this chamber the time that she wore a Pussy Riot cap in solidarity with the Russian rock band incarcerated for standing up to Putin. I was her vice-convener on the Equalities and Human Rights Committee for much of the last session, so I got to know her pretty well, and I was always very fond of her. And if you were to ask me to summarise Christina's personality in 3 words, they would be these: love, light and laughter. So uncommon in the world of politics, but in the final analysis, Presiding Officer, what else really matters? On behalf of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, I express our sincere condolences to all of those who loved Christina and who grieve her loss today. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call up Nicola Sturgeon.
This chamber feels far too quiet without Christina's infectious laugh. It is impossible in 3 minutes to encapsulate the remarkable human being she was. But let me share these fundamental truths about a woman I was so privileged to call my friend. First, she was a truly exceptional politician with abilities all too rare in places like this. The connections she made with people came from her heart, a heart she always wore proudly on her sleeve and which burned with a passion for social justice and equality. When I made Christina a minister, I knew she would do a good job, but I did not anticipate the strength of the impact she made. As First Minister, whenever I encountered someone who worked in her policy field, they would invariably tell me that they loved her. No disrespect to my other ministers, but that was not normal. Second, she was the beating heart of her family. Forgive me, Presiding Officer, if I address them directly. Keith, you were her soulmate, and I don't think you will ever know how much happiness you brought her, and I know she made you deeply happy too. Lewis and Jack, she was so very, very proud of you. Rare was the conversation with your mum that didn't involve accounts of what one or both of you were up to. A little known fact is that Jack and I share a birthday, which meant Christina was always one of the first people I would hear from on my birthday every year. I will so miss those texts. But from now on, Jack, whether you like it or not, in my little mark of remembrance, I am going to be the first person you hear from on your birthday every single year. Finally, Christina McKelvey was an absolutely incredible friend. Over the past couple of years in particular, when she must so often have had the weight of the world on her own shoulders, she was always concerned to know how I was. On St Andrew's Day last year, we were both at Janie Godley's funeral. I could tell that day Christina wasn't feeling well, so I forced her to let me drive her home. I am going to gloss over her assessment of my driving, but I am so deeply grateful to have had that time with Christina. It was probably the most profound conversation we ever had. She opened up about her fears of what lay ahead and for the loved ones that she knew she would leave behind far too soon. And we reflected together on how short life is, how important it is to live every single day of it to the full, and even in the darkest of times, to find reasons to laugh. And it is that, ultimately, her laugh and her unfailing ability, no matter what, to lift my spirits, that I will remember most about the beautiful, funny, wise woman that was Christina McKelvey. Christina, I loved you. We all loved you. And I am going to miss you so very much.
I call Fiona Hislop.
Presiding Officer, bright, breezy, with a brilliant smile bursting into a room is how I first met Christina McKelvey over 20 years ago, and how I remember her to this day. I was leading a training day for SNP women, and this bright spark of a woman, an active trade unionist, a feminist and a gallus, articulate woman, relayed how she was an organiser and an engine room election agent, but never candidate material. But I saw that potential, and she credited or blamed me, along with Nicola Sturgeon, for getting her to stand with her subsequent election. And I got to know her fierce passion for tackling inequalities when she was then my parliamentary liaison officer in education, shortly after she was elected. And then she was a fine committee convener, navigating European and External Relations Committee, and then Equalities and Human Rights, where she thrived and excelled. And all the kind comments made by MSPs across the political divide last week demonstrated that with her sheer force of personality and kindness, she must be the MSP who has impacted the most on so many in this Parliament. And she used her time as a backbencher to reach out and connect with others. Her warm personality, empathy and compassion made an impact on her constituents, and she clearly relished serving her constituency. And during the pandemic, I automatically thought of her with her trade union background and asked her to work with Jamie Hepburn to coordinate the recovery plans in preparation for reopening workplaces, working with unions and employers. And I was so pleased to see the STUC pay tribute to her this week. Of course, her brightest beaming smile was when she talked with pride of her sons, her boys, who have grown up to be such fine young men, and her pride in becoming a granny recently. And anyone in the company of Keith and Christina as a couple saw the love, the affection and the joy they found in each other, although I'm never sure how she really felt about being called affectionately doll and hen by our dear friend Keith. Christina McKelvey also had a curious mind and loved to learn and explore new things, and had an encyclopedic knowledge of astronomy. The world and space was big and needed explored. And that big world is smaller with her passing, but she made it brighter by being part of it. It has been a privilege to know Christina McKelvey and now a responsibility to learn from her. My thoughts are with all who loved her.
I call Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I have a memory, as many of us do, of being cajoled into a committee room during our lunch breaks to don a bright pink feather boa. And in my case, I'm pretty sure some pink pearls too. There is much photographic evidence of this. But it was all in a good cause. It was in support of the Wear It Pink campaign. And I say to the First Minister, some of us needed less persuading than others to do this. But why is that? Because you can't take yourself too seriously for a good cause. It was a fun way to highlight a very serious issue. And doesn't that just sum up Christina McKelvey perfectly? A fun person who took our passions incredibly seriously. Like when she and I marched arm in arm at the 2018 Edinburgh Pride event, or when she reached out to me immediately after FMQs to arrange a meeting after I had raised the issue of drug deaths in my own region. She was always proud to work across the chamber on issues where there was a shared passion. It was her fearless support and campaigning for the Thai campaign back in 2016 that I remember. Her lobbying efforts helped that campaign gain cross-party support, including many from my own benches. And it was her endless passion for equality was, and still is, something that I hold dear. You know, she once said to me in the Parliament bar after a mutually difficult day, "You're no bad for a Tory." And I think in our mind's eye we can all hear her voice in that phrase. But it was perhaps a similarity of our roots in life for the reason that I took that as a massive compliment. She also said to me after another mutually difficult day, "Jamie, you can only do your best and be proud of your achievements. Colleagues, what more can you ask for in life? Do your best and be proud of your achievements." I hope Christina's family are proud of her today. If I had to sum her up in a single word, that word would be fun. And there's a lesson in life for all of us, isn't there? Be passionate, be decent, but enjoy your life. And I make a promise to those grieving her loss today that there are plenty of us left here in this Parliament who will try to keep the flames of her many passions alight.
I call Neil Gray.
Presiding Officer, Christina is the best of us, a force of nature, a warrior for those she served and a rock for those she loved. Christina gave a great hug. They were indeed powerful, and I will cherish the memory of our last hug. Christina gave more than just physical hugs, though. The way that she built relationships with her staff, with her friends, with those she met as an MSP and a minister was by metaphorically putting her arms around you and pulling you in. Rachel Patterson, Christina's most recent private secretary, shared the following with me. "From the moment I met Christina, I felt a warmth and noticed she was like this with everyone she came across. It didn't matter who you were. She taught me so much in the time we spent together. I'll visit the bench in St Andrews Harbour that you told me your mum loved, and I hope you will be sitting right beside me." Rachel's right, Presiding Officer. Christina was always there. I've heard so many stories of people Christina quietly supported through their cancer journey while she was going through her own. Christina lifted those around her, friend or stranger, with her love, her kindness and her generosity. She also drove those of us around her with her wit, her fire and her principled determination. I will treasure so much her messages of encouragement and pride when I joined her in government. She put her arms around me and built me up. Her long-time office manager, Martha McAllister, told me this was the way that she was with her staff too. She made sure to surround herself, as Martha put it, with similarly bolshy, trade union-trained staff. Christina was clear in the way people should be treated. I'm so sorry to all those across government, her constituency and Civic Scotland who will miss her dearly. But most of all, Presiding Officer, my heart truly breaks for Keith, for Jack and Lewis and Christina's family, for whilst we have lost 1 in a million, you've lost your world. And I hope that they can take comfort in the wave of messages and tributes that have been paid to Christina, all testament to her ability to build and forge relationships. And a perfect example of this is from a member of the Gypsy Traveller community who wrote the most beautiful poem about Christina. And this paragraph encapsulates what I mean. A gypsy man once lost, unheard, found strength in her promise, her every word. She showed me I mattered. She taught me to stand, with wisdom, with laughter, with a gentle hand. That came to Christina instinctively, through who she was, her generosity, her callousness and her graft for people. Christina is the best of us. While we won't see her again or get that hug, Christina's legacy lives on in all of those that she sought to serve. She gave them hope and she left the world better than she found it. Thank you, Christina. We will miss you desperately.
Thank you. I call Paul O'Kane.
The Book of Wisdom in the Old Testament says that length of days is not what makes age honourable, nor number of years the true measure of life. Understanding, this is man's grey hairs, and tarnished life, this is ripe old age. And even if you're not a person of faith, I think that poetry speaks to all of us. Our colleague has gone too soon, but today and in the days to come, we have an opportunity to measure her life, her love, her contribution in this place, and the contribution she made to so many people. Her constituents, many of the stories of how she helped them, we will never know. But we do know of the countless people that she would have helped with her kindness, her compassion and dedication. We can also measure her life and love for Keith, for Lewis and Jack, and for all of her family and friends. The Book of Wisdom would say of those bonds, coming to perfection in so short a while, she achieved long life. I did not know Christina for as long as so many others in this Parliament, but I found a photograph last week of the Edinburgh Pride March in 2022, which was led by Alex Cole-Hamilton, Maggie Chapman, me and Christina. She brought her 2 nieces that day and was so proud to be showing them the importance of allyship and standing with others and standing up for equality in Scotland, so much of which she helped to build. And we had a great chat that day on a long march around Edinburgh. We spoke about everything from our shared admiration for James Connolly to who could whistle the loudest when passing people who were objecting to the Pride March. And of course, as colleagues opposite would expect, she tried very hard to convince me of the merits of Scottish independence. And I think we agreed to disagree on that one. But, Presiding Officer, that is how I will remember Christina McKelvey. That sunny day in Edinburgh, full of joy, of love, of energy, on a march for the equalities and human rights of people she stood with for so long. That was the measure of her life. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There were a lot of hats in Christina's life. The iconic pink berries, bowlers and cowboy hats. The pussycat hat in this chamber, which she wore, which mentioned already. What we forget that day is how she decried Trump and what he was doing in America so powerfully. Thank you, Martha, for the crafting. My heart goes out to Dion, Alex, Neil, Marianne and Lindsay, and our shared staff, David and Claire, and all those who have worked with her over the years. And it goes out to the wider Parliament community, to our staff here, Kirsty the barista, Audrey in security, and our mace bearer Robert all of whom were favourites. Christina also had many friends in the Consular Corps of Edinburgh, and I know they are hurting today. Christina was the first SNP Group trade union liaison in this Parliament. Christina was the first person to champion the cause of MND and MND nurses. She was the first committee convener to champion eradicating the scourge of human trafficking. And her standing work has been mentioned with the Gypsy Traveller community, evidenced by Tommy's lovely poem that was shared by Jack on his Facebook. She was the first to raise revenge porn, menopause stigma, to fight for Clare's Law. She was the first in line at any Pride March. The first boot in the ground as we walked up the hill to protest at Dungavel with the other Lanarkshire lassies. Christina was first on the dance floor, first on the tables and occasionally the bar at the legendary Hamilton Lark Colstone House Burn Suppers with her great friend, Councillor Lynn Adams. I hope they are dancing together today. Christina was the first to offer a hand of friendship to support those in need and to give a voice to those who had none. And Christina was the last person who would ever have let anyone down. More hats. An amazing mum, granny, sister, partner, aunt, daughter and friend. And all in her and Keith's lovely, blended family adored her. I will always remember a magical summer evening in Dubrovnik in 2019. An orchestra played beside us while we ate dinner. And as a finale ode to joy was echoing round the square, we all stood alongside with the many Europeans there that night, hands in hearts, tears in our eyes, mourning what we were about to lose. But of course, it only fired her spirit to fight all the more for our independence and to have Scotland rightfully back in the family of European nations. So you've been told, folks. Presiding Officer, Christina lit up all of our lives, and our world will forever be duller without her.
Thank you. I call Monica Lennon.
Christina McKelvey was passionate, principled and patriotic. We had our political differences, but over many years I experienced her warmth that so many others have mentioned and her wisdom. As one quarter of Christina's team Holly Boobs with Gillian Mackay and Christine Jardine, I will cherish our unforgettable moonwalk around Edinburgh. She united us to raise funds and awareness about breast cancer, an illness that does not care about party politics. Hamilton Lark Colstone House Labour Party paid tribute to Christina on Friday night. And I extend our sincere condolences and love to Keith, to Lewis and Jack, to her grandchildren, all her family and friends, especially her SNP family, and everyone who loved Christina. Larkhall and District Volunteer Group will remember her as compassionate. Friends of Stonehouse Park have honoured a positive personality. And Hamilton District Food Bank said, "It has been a privilege to have had Christina in our lives. And I will remember the women who believed in human rights, who fought for equality and championed social justice." Presiding Officer, Christina loved a good quote, so I conclude with her words spoken in this chamber, in this Scottish Parliament, that she loved. And she said, "Be bold, be courageous, and be brave, because the people of this land, our Scotland, demand and deserve nothing less."
Thank you. I call Shona Robertson.
It's an honour to be able to say a few words today about our friend and our colleague Christina. I first met Christina when we both worked in social work in the north of Glasgow, and I can tell you even then Christina was a force to be reckoned with and was very heavily involved and active in her trade union, always campaigning for better, always on the side of those less fortunate, always campaigning for fairness. And immediately upon meeting Christina, I had no doubt that there was a place for Christina in frontline politics. I also felt I had met a kindred spirit, which turned out to be true when we met again in this Parliament. And there's no doubt, as others have said, Christina certainly made her mark in this place, campaigning on issues close to her heart. And I have to say I have some cracking and quite ridiculous photos of us as part of the Wear It Pink campaign. Once Christina set her mind to supporting a cause, that was it. Total energy and commitment given to that cause. And I think that's why so many people from all walks of life have paid tribute to Christina's amazing contribution to public life. My last call with Christina was about a month ago. And I can tell colleagues she was on great form, talking about time with family, life as a granny, giving me some very strong views about the issues of the day and her opinion on them, and also how difficult she'd found it coming to the decision not to stand again. It was a good call, and I'm really thankful for it. Christina, thank you for being you and for giving everything you gave to those of us who were lucky enough to know you and regard you as a friend. My deepest condolences to Keith, Jack, Lewis and the whole family. Our thoughts are with you all at the most difficult of times. Rest in peace, Christina, my dear friend.
Thank you. I call Keith Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Thank you also for the personal support that you've given both to me and the family, not just in the last couple of weeks, but inquiring after Christina's health for so many months. I can also thank the First Minister, not just for the same thing, the constantly concerned for Christina's health, but in the way that he was able to manage her absence from government, and also, crucially, his 2 visits to the hospital, the first of which had a huge impact on Christina's family who were there at that time. I can also thank the members of the SNP group for their support over many months. I know you're all hurting as we are. Can I thank the party leaders and all those that have spoken? There's not a great deal left for me to say. You've hit all the right notes in terms of what Christina was and what she was about. It might be invidious to do so, but I can mention very quickly 3 people. Kirsty, who was mentioned in the coffee bar, who was always keen to hear about how Christina was doing. To Edward Mountain, similarly, who always inquired after Christina, notwithstanding his own issues with cancer. And also to Jamie Green, not just for what he said today, but the fantastic card that he sent to Christina. And he will know, and I will know what was in that, and that will stay between us. And also to her constituents and all the groups that have been in touch. An absolutely incredible response. And she was everything that people have said today. And she genuinely was. I know sometimes after somebody passes away, lots are said, but she was all those things. She was a feminist. She was a staunch supporter of the LGBTQ community. She was a staunch supporter of travellers, and many people were not. And can I say, and I know it's contentious, but it wouldn't be true not to say it, Christina was a trans ally. Yeah. Christina supported trans people. She was also, of course, and it's no surprise to anybody to hear me say, a very staunch supporter of independence. Now, Christina loved Scotland, its people, its culture, its history, but she also knew that many other people who didn't believe independence felt similarly strong about their country. And that is why I think you saw such an absence of malice and vindictiveness on the part of Christina. Also, it's been mentioned that Christina came from Easterhouse. She was extremely proud of the fact that she came from Easterhouse. She received some really snide comments when she was first elected, misogynistic and classist comments. but they just did not know the real Christina. And I think that's where she imbibed her values of social justice. And many of us learn these things quite legitimately when we read about politics or learn about politics. It was instinctive to Christina. It's who she was. She was also an artist, a very gifted artist. She was a poet. She wrote a fantastic poem for our granddaughter Maeve when she was born. She loved to travel. She loved to swim in a warm ocean. She wasn't for sitting by the pool. She wanted to be in the ocean. She loved science. There was a tribute to her paid by David Blanchflower, the astrophysicist, on Twitter, saying he felt he'd lost somebody that was extremely intelligent and fearless. And she was also a very gifted photographer. I always thought Christina to be a stunningly attractive woman. The real measure of Christina was not how she looked, but it was in her mind and in her heart. She never walked by on the other side. The number of times we were out when she would stop by somebody in the street, either giving them money or food or her time. One time in Campbelltown, a drunken man had fallen down. She wouldn't leave his side till the ambulance came. The newly, a mother who had just given birth to a child who had no money for a pram that Christina bought, and also the bedclothes to go with it. Christina loved a cup of tea, black, 2 sweeteners. And just to underline the point, in hospital, I'd asked Christina if she wanted a cup of tea. And it wasn't a great time for Christina. And unusually, I was the only person in the hospital at the time. And she said, yes, please, but make sure everyone else has got one. There was nobody else in the room, but that was her instinct. And just to reassure people, those that loved her most, during the last week or so, Christina was never on her own. At every point, 24 hours a day, members of her family sat with her, held her hand, told her that she was loved, and she was surrounded by love in that last week. Christina, when she was first elected, went to an event in central Scotland. She met an MP from a different party, or rather than met him, she saw him, a large man, haranguing this young woman who was a Scottish Government comms officer, shouting at her. She stormed over and stood between them. And she said, your size, your shouting and your toxic masculinity don't intimidate me, so you can back off. I think it was back off that she said. It was something like that. And if you were going to intimidate a woman, you didn't do it around Christina McKelvey. She was, as we've heard, very proud to be an MSP and a government minister. When she became a minister, I wrote on Twitter a line from Simon and Garfunkel, sail on, silver girl, your time has come to shine. And Christina sparkled and she shined. In the chamber, she never hated anybody. I remember the worst thing I heard her say was to a Tory MSP, she asked the question, why, that if he'd come to engage her in a battle of wits, he had come unarmed. It was meant in good humour, and it was taken in good humour. And also, Liz Smith will remember the endless Thursday morning education debates in that session. And in one of her contributions, Christina managed to get virtually every ABBA title into her contribution. She was great fun. Christina and I apparently first spoke in 2001. I don't remember it, but of course Christina, who had a mind like a steel trap, remembers it. I was the leader of Clackmannshire Council. 2 of her members she was representing had been arrested at Faz Lane, and she wanted to make sure that their employer, Clackmannshire Council, didn't further penalise them, which she made sure didn't happen. But she recollects in saying she found me to be opinionated and cocky. Which just shows us so sometimes Christina could be wrong as well. And then in 2007, at a rally, a pre-election rally for SNP candidates in Napier, I just thought she was a stunningly attractive woman and way, way out of my league. And then I became a committee convener, and Christina was on the committee, and I found a way to try and get on her good side. She hated being called Christine, and apologies to Christine Graham if you see her. So I was the person that jumped down the throat of anybody that had the audacity to call her Christine, and I bid to try and impress her as her defender. I'm not sure if it worked, but it was 18 months before we got together. And Christina's phrase for that is, we found love in a hopeless place. I've often thought of Christina as a star. People have talked about how much fun she was. To me, she was glamorous, she was sparkly, she was fun. And, of course, planets revolve around stars. I just don't know what a planet does when its star has been extinguished. She was a credit to her two sons, Lewis and Jack. She would take such pride in her grandchildren, Leo and Maeve, and they'll never be allowed to forget Christina. She was a credit to her community, to Easter House, to the Scottish Government, to this Parliament and to Scotland. She was more beautiful inside than outside. And apart from my children, Christina McKelvey was the best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you.
Thank you. And the question is that motion 17000 in the name of John Swinney on motion of condolence be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. The motion is therefore agreed and I suspend this meeting until 3:15.